Teruma. It's taken from Malachim. The Parsha of Teruma discusses the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert. And this Haftorah discusses the building of the first Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo. The Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo, in its time, was one of the splendors of the ancient world. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. According to many, the Beis HaMikdash of Herod, the second Beis HaMikdash, the last version of it, was even more splendid in terms of a building. But the Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo had in it the physical manifestation of God, so to speak. It had miracles. It had the cloud was there. The magical fire was there. The ark was there. It had all of the artifacts of the Mishkan were present in the Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo. None of them were present in the Beis HaMikdash of Herod. So the Haftarah begins in this description with a very, very interesting description here. Hashem nosam chokmo l'shlomo kasher diber lo. The Tanakh here makes reference to the fact that God appeared to Shlomo and said to him that you have one wish, and whichever attribute you would like to have, I will grant to you. And Shlomo chose the attribute of wisdom. The Meforshim remarked ruefully that he chose it before he had the attribute. Because whether or not wisdom, as we see in Kehelis, that Shlomo is a little rueful about all the wisdom that he has. And that sometimes it's not easy in life to be wise and to be clever and to know everything. I once heard my Rebbe once said that, in the class, and the guy in the back got up and he said, I know, Rebbe, I know. I remember the Rebbe answered me, he said, you're right, humility would have been a better quality, all right? There's the truth to that also. So, God granted Shlomo's wish. Vashem nosan chochmo l'Shlomo kasher diber lo. God gave him wisdom as he had promised. And Shlomo's wisdom had in it many different facets. First of all, he had the wisdom that he knew more about nature, and he knew more about the world than any human being. So that's the wisdom of knowledge, of understanding one's environment. Rabbis tell us that Shlomo understood the language of the fish and of the birds and of the world itself. Nature has its own language. But he also had the wisdom of diplomacy. Shlomo, in his lifetime, ruled over what was practically a united world. And he did so not on the basis of force, not on the basis of empire, but on the basis of the fact that he was such an idyllic person, and he had within himself such qualities that the monarchs respected him, and they all came to visit him, and he became the center for human involvement. So for a long period of time during the reign of Shlomo, there was no war in the world. Our rabbis tell us that he was the teacher of the wise men of Athens. He was the father of philosophy and modern mathematics, which he gave to the Greeks as a gift. And that he had all of these great qualities, but even the wisest of all men makes terrible mistakes. And he ended it. He ended it by his own mistakes. His mistakes with his wives, his mistakes with his condescension, not condescension, but his allowing idolatry to exist, his tolerance of evil, all conspired eventually to bring him to a very sad end. Shlomo is one of the great tragic stories in the Tanakh. A person who literally had everything and could have had even more, so to speak, and who somehow fritters it away, loses it. Yet he remains in Jewish legend and Jewish history not only a figure of note and of gigantic stature, but a holy figure and a person whom the Jewish people identify with, and who is seen in a very positive sense in his weakness weaknesses, his negative attributes, etc., all of that, that's not that time has erased it, but on balance, his greatness is seen. There was, at this time, the king of Phoenicia, whose name was Hiram, Melech Tzor. His capital was in the city of Tyre. And Phoenicia was the largest, wealthiest country in the world. It was the United States, it was Japan, it was the great trading nation. It was the nation that had an empire, and it, for a long period of time, was supreme to the Jewish people, superior. And Shlomo is the one, again, through chokhmah, through wisdom, through his own personal example, Hiram became his friend, and not only his ally, but his friend. There's a difference. An ally is usually dependent upon external situations or motivations, and if those external situations change, so then the alliance goes down the tubes. Here we're talking about a friendship, a personal respect, and Hiram was most impressed with Shlomo. And because of this peace that existed between them, this harmonious relationship, this mutual admiration that they had for each other, they entered into a covenant, and the covenant was a trading covenant, a pact of commerce, a pact of diplomacy, but it is the pact that facilitated the building of the Beis HaMikdash, because Shlomo could not have done it without Hiram. Hiram and his country provided the natural resources and a great deal of the labor, and the rest was supplied by the Jewish people, and Shlomo needed him. It's interesting because of the fact that Hiram is represented here as the builder, one of the builders of the Beis HaMikdash. So in the Freemason lodges, Freemasonry, which today is less popular than it used to be, but for a long period at the end of the Middle Ages and in the beginning of the modern age, the Freemasons were seen as one of the most revolutionary and secret and anti-establishment societies in the world. The church was bitterly against Masonry, Freemasonry, and others. It was subversive to be a Freemason. And the Masonic lodges, their hero was always named Hiram, because he was the man who, through wisdom and through tact, was Shlomo's friend and built the Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo mas mikol Yisrael. So in order to build the Beis HaMikdash, so Shlomo placed a tax. Now the word mas here as a tax does not mean a tax of money, though money was always necessary. But the word mas here is the word mas oved. Mas oved means a tax of labor, which in the ancient world was quite common. That instead of collecting money and hiring workers, what people had to give you a certain amount of time. We call it the army today, or maneuvers, or the National Guard, or Miluim, right? You have to give the government 10 days a year, 30 days a year, 50 days a year. And the government assigns you whatever work they want to assign to you, and you actually work. It's not a question of mas in terms of a tax, it's mas in terms of human labor. So Shlomo taxed the Jewish people. He made a draft of people that he impressed into labor. 30,000 men was the tax. In other words, he drafted 30,000 men into his service. Difference of opinion of Meforshim how the 30,000 were chosen. Some say that the 30,000 were chosen not at random, but on the basis of their skills. He needed masons who could work the stone. He needed carpenters who could work the wood. He needed builders. So in effect, he drafted the construction industry, and he made them do the work. Others say that the 30,000 were taken at random. Every tribe had to supply a certain quota. And let's say if there are 12 tribes, every tribe supplied 2,500 men. And the 2,500 men could be chosen any way the tribe wanted them to choose. Others say a third thing, that the mas was voluntary. He asked for 30,000, who wants to volunteer to help build God's temple? to help build the Beis HaMikdash. If you phrase it correctly, if it's packaged and publicized in a positive fashion, then it's possible to get people to do work. It's possible to attract people to do something. So therefore the Mass, even though it was obligatory on the Jewish people, the 30,000 workers were volunteers. They were people who came to work on their own. So those are the ones. Those are the ones that are mentioned. Now the Ralbag mentions here of Levi and Gershon, mentions an obscure medrash that the 30,000 men were all converts. They were all Gerim. Those who built the Beis HaMikdash were Gerim. And he also mentions that they probably were not Gerim Tzedek, but Gerim Toshavim. Gerim Toshavim means non-Jews who did not adopt the ways of Judaism, but who forsook the ways of paganism, and who had a right to live in the land of Israel, who were citizens of the country, but they were not Jews. And that therefore these 30,000 men, the Ralbag says, were not Jewish. They were Gerim Toshavim. Where his tradition is, it's hard to, he says that it's in the book of Divrei Hayomim. It's hard to know. But in any event, we do know that there were 153,600 Gerim at the time of Shlomo. That count is given to us. Our rabbis say at the time of Shlomo, there was such an influx of Jews through conversion that they had to stop taking. He didn't allow anybody to become a ger anymore. The Talmud says at the time of the Mashiach also there'll be a tremendous influx. Right? It will be the in thing to be Jewish. And just as today it is less than the in thing, and then it will be the in thing to be Jewish. So then also, when it becomes the in thing to be Jewish, so then we shut the doors. Then we're not interested in gerim. But when it's not the in thing, so then there's a certain sincerity that's obviously present. Otherwise, why would he or she be interested in becoming a convert? So out of this 153,600 number of gerim, we're taking this group of 30,000 workers who worked to bring the Beis HaMikdash to its conclusion. The influx of gerim within the Jewish people is one of the great historic phenomena. There were numerous waves of converts who came into Judaism, and who to a certain extent supplied Judaism with the Jewish people rather, with a variety and a vitality and a new start. And here at the time of Shlomo was the first that when the Jewish people went out of Egypt, there were a large number of gerim. The Arab went out with them. Then when the Jewish people came to the land of Canaan, it diminished. There the trend of assimilation went the other way. The Jews became goyim. They became pagans. Now, at the time of David and Shlomo, with the building of the Beis HaMikdash and the strengthening of the Jewish position, so then just the opposite happens. A large number of goyim become Jews. Then at the time of the Churban Bayis, there was again a diminishing. Jews ran away. When Ezra came back, a lot of gerim came with it. A lot of goyim became gerim because it was a new start. It was like the frontier, the West. So a lot of people came with various degrees of success. At the time of the Roman Empire, there was an enormous movement of gerim. Such an enormous movement of gerim that the Roman emperors were sorely frightened of the Jews and of the influence of Judaism, and fought it openly. And they passed rules against converting. That he who converted forfeited at the minimum his citizenship in the Roman Empire, and sometimes even forfeited his life. And some of the greatest men in Jewish history in that period are descended from gerim. Shmaya, Naftalion, Reb Meir, Rabbi Akiva, Unkelos, Those are all Gerim. What? No, because Judaism held an attraction simply because of the fact that the Roman Empire then had become so decadent and paganism obviously so wrong. The people looked for an answer. Judaism provided an answer. There's no question that if Judaism would have, which is an impossibility naturally, but if there would have been a dispensation for circumcision, then maybe a third of the Roman Empire would have become Jewish. But because of the requirement of circumcision, especially in an adult, and everything that went with it, so that was the self-limiting factor. When the Christians caught on to that, Paul caught on to that, and he waived everything. He waived circumcision and Shabbos and Kashrus and everything, and he hit the jackpot. The whole Roman Empire converted. But the wave of conversions to Christianity was a byproduct, to a certain extent, of the previous early conversions to Judaism. Previous wave, which was conversions to Judaism. Then in our time, there have been very little. Again, the stream is one way. Against the stream is the Jews go out, unfortunately. But here you're talking about a time when there was an enormous amount of Gerim, and the Gerim made a great contribution. Vayishlachem levonono. Shlomo sent them north into the Lebanon. The Lebanon then, as today, had great cedars, great trees, primeval forests, and a great deal of stone and a great deal of wood was used in the first Beis HaMikdash. Aseret alofim b'chodesh chalifos, 10,000 a month, chalifos in shifts, meaning that he never sent the 30,000 at once. 10,000 worked and 20,000 rested at home. It was in a continual rotation of 10,000 working and 20,000 being in reserve. Chodesh Yil Balvonon, 1 month did they work in the Lebanon, 1 month of service did they give, Ushnayim Chodoshim Beveso, and then they were entitled to 2 months vacation. That's what my students always tell me, that's the right ratio. 1 day of work and 2 days of vacation. Va'adoniram alamos, and the name of the officer of Shlomo that was in charge, was Adoniram, which is a fitting name. Adoniram, my master is exalted. And he was the one that was in charge of this massive undertaking. Vayhi l'Shlomo shivim olef nosei sabo. Shlomo also had 70,000 porters. Now, these were paid workers, not part of the volunteer force or part of the drafted force. These were paid people. This was the payroll. So they had to bring these enormous stones and these enormous timber wood down from the Lebanon to Yerushalayim, and the way that they did it was with manpower, basically manpower. So you needed great numbers of people. You needed tremendous tens and tens of thousands of people to be able to do this. So we had 70,000 nosei sabo, whom we would call porters, who were carried on their backs, on their shoulders. Ushmoni melech chotzei bahor, and 80,000 quarried in the mountain to cut the stones. Now, it's interesting that the stones for the first Beis HaMikdash were not Jerusalem stones. That they were stones from the Lebanon. Whereas from then on, they almost always used stone from quarries outside Yerushalayim. Just as today, all of Jerusalem by zoning law is built with stone. You cannot build a wooden building. You can't build a stucco building. You can't build a brick building. The facade of the building has to be Jerusalem stone. It can be polished, it can be rough. You get different colors, different shades, but it has to be Jerusalem stone. And they have enormous quarries all around Jerusalem. I mean, there's no shortage of rock. And they quarry the stone from there. Well, here he quarried the stone in the Lebanon, and he brought it. He brought it down with this 70,000. The 80,000 dug the stone, and the 70,000 Jerusalem. Well, you can imagine you're talking, you got 200,000 people involved already in this project. You have an enormous logistical thing. Levad Miskorei Amitzovim Lishlomo Shel HaMalocha, and this does not include the foremen. This does not include the supervisors. Does not include the men that were responsible for the work, which were Shloshes Alofim V'Shlosh Meos, another 3,300 men that Shlomo had to run it. Rodim Ba'am, who ruled the people. Rodim means to rule, but it means to discipline the people. Osim B'Malacha, who were doing the work. So the Gemara says that the distribution was as follows. The 3,000 took care of the 30,000. Meaning everyone was in charge of 10. Everybody had his own minion that he was in charge of. That's where it all began. And then the 3,000 in turn were under the charge of 300 men who were the top foremen. Yes. Well, but they gave him food and lodging. It's like being in the army. The army doesn't pay you. For a practical purpose. I mean, the Israeli army doesn't. It's like being on jury duty or something. You know, when you work for the government, you really don't get paid. So that what they did is that they got food and they got shelter during the period of time that they were there. But that was it. And the chain of command was in tens. There were 30,000 workers. There were 3,000 foremen. There were 300 managers on top of the foremen. We find that in the Chumash that the smallest number was 10. In other words, the leader had to have at least 10 people. That was the judicial number of the decision, that the cutoff point that existed. So we see that Shlomo employed it as well. Vayetzav HaMelech, and the king commanded, Vayasiyu avonim gedolos. The king ordered that they should move. Vayasiyu, transport. Masa is a trip, journey. They should transport great stones, large stones. So you don't want to. The Canaanite architecture of the time was to use small stones. If you see it in any of the Canaanite fortresses that the archaeologists have dug out, like Hatzor or Jericho or Megiddo, you always see that they use small stones embedded in the concrete, and that was the Canaanite wall, the Canaanite building. The Jews built with much larger stones. Later on, King Herod would build with such enormous stones, with ashlars, that even today we stand back in awe and wonder, how did he move them? How did he put them into place? But here you're talking about small stones, so therefore Shlomo didn't want that the Beis HaMikdash should look like a Canaanite building. He did not want that it should conform to Canaanite architecture, so he told them to make it large stones. Avonim Yekoros, good stones, precious stones, dear. So the Meforshim say he chose stones for their color and for their strength and for their texture. They matched it. They didn't just take stam stones, but they matched it in such a way that it was perfect. Same reason why we buy Italian ceramic marble or something, right? It's important. I was in Southern California yesterday. 2 out of every 3 cars on the road in Southern California is imported. So there's an attraction to it. Liyaseid haboyis. And he used the great stones, liyasei aboyis, as the foundation of the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, they took these great stones and sunk them. And upon them they put the pilings of the lumber, the timber that would support the building. Avnei gozis, hewn stones. So we'll see later that in the Haftorah that when the Beis Hamikdash was built, no metal tools were used. So therefore, these stones had to be pre-cut to their size. It was really a prefabricated building, and they were cut. The adjustment was made through the worm, through the shamir, which existed. That they would draw a line and put the shamir on it, and the shamir would follow the line. He had radar, and his passing over the stone allowed it to be cracked open, trimmed to that size. Vayifselu bonei Shlomo bonei Chiram v'hagivlim. The stones were vayifselu, pesel. They were formed into the proper forms. Stones were polished. They were cut to the size. The givlim is an interesting word. The givlim literally means the cement mixers. Ligvon means to mix the cement. So they were the lime workers, the ones that worked in the cement. They all worked together. And they got it all ready. They knew exactly how many stones they needed. The Talmud tells us they marked on the stone the number. It was literally prefabricated building, like painting by numbers. They got it all ready on the job site. And then, when everything was there ready, so then they could put it up in a short period of time, and much easier than having to do it inefficiently and go prepare the material every time when it became necessary to put it in the building. So vayhi b'shmonim shana ve'arba'meo shana l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim. In the 480th year from the Exodus. The Exodus was in the year 2448, the creation. So this is the year 2848, the creation. It's approximately the year 1312 minus 480. So it's like 860 something. To the base up to the leaving of the Jewish people from Egypt. Vashono Haravis. In the 4th year of the reign of King Solomon. B'chodesh Ziv, in the month of Ziv. The month of Ziv today is called the month of Iyar. Hu HaChodesh Hasheni, it is the 2nd month. Limlot Shlomo al Yisrael, to the 4th year from Bevel. The names of the month that we have, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, those are all non-Jewish names. Those are all Babylonian names. In fact, it's interesting, a number of the names are names of gods in the pantheon of the pagan gods of Bavel. Like the month Tammuz is mentioned many times in Tanakh, that Tammuz was the name of a god of fire. It was hot. And Tammuz is in the summer, it's the hottest month. Other such examples. So the names of the months that we have came up with Ezra at the time of the beginning of the Second Commonwealth. The names that are seen here are the original biblical names. Chodesh Ziv, the word Ziv means radiance. It's the nicest month of the year, Iyar. Spring at its most. And everything is in bloom and everything is radiant. It's not too hot yet. So that's Chodesh Ziv. So the house that he built, so he built it double the size of the Mishkan. That the space of the building was 60 amos in length, which is 120 feet, and 20 amos in width, which is 40 feet. Ushloshim amma komoso, 60 feet high, 30 amos high. So that wasn't really that impressive a building. We'll see that when Herod came, he made the size much greater. Herod's building was 3 times the size of Shlomo's building. And the Gemara darshans all sorts of reasons how they came to these sizes. Alpi Kabbalah, the legend, the mystical thing is, again, that there are 10 levels of Kedusha, 10 spheres of holiness that exist in the world. And that these sizes somehow all fit into these levels of holiness, and mathematically you're able to function on a holy basis with this ratio. But the ratio always was 3 to 1 to 2. In other words, it was 3 times long, it was 3 long, 1 wide, and 2 high. That's the ratio of the Beis HaMikdash always. 1, 2, 3. Right, 1 wide, 2 high, 3 long. And Herod kept that ratio. That was the symmetrical ratio of the building always. The ulam, the courtyard, was in front of the Heichal Habayis, in front of the palace, in front of the building, was Esri Mama Orka, was 20 amas long, Apnei Rochav Habayis Eser Ba'ama, and it ran 10 amas wide in front. It was like a green belt of 10 amas wide in front of the house. Rachba Apnei Habayis, running the width of the Beis HaMikdash. Vayas Labayis Chalonei Shkufim Atumi, one of the great psukim in Tanakh. It's difficult for us to know what it means. He made in the Beis HaMikdash Chalonei windows Shkufim Atumi. So the word Shokuf in Hebrew means to be seen, Lahashkif, to see. The word Otum in Hebrew means sealed, opaque. So what kind of windows were they? So again, my Rebbe used to say dirty windows, right? But the Malbim and others learn here that Shlomo was the first one to learn the science of glass making, and to use glass for windows. And that Shkufi Matumi meant windows that sealed, which glass windows do, they seal out the weather. And nevertheless, Shkufim, they are windows that you can see through. They're windows that provide light and vision. The Gemara Darshan Shkufi Matumi, that the windows of the Beis HaMikdash were narrow on the inside and wide on the outside, to signify that the light emanated from within and not from without, to signify that the Beis HaMikdash did not need any outside light, but that the outside world needed the light of the Beis HaMikdash. But then there are Meforshim that say just the opposite, that Shkufi Matumi means that the windows on the inside were narrow and on the outside were wide. There was a different lesson involved. But in any event, it's a difficult verse for us to understand. Though there's always, at least in rabbinic literature, whenever you say a drasha about this pasuk, it always is that the windows on the inside were narrow and the windows on the outside were wide, to show you that true light in the world emanates from the place of holiness. The place of holiness does not require external sources of light. The Gemara always mentions that when it discusses the menorah, so it says, what do they need a menorah in the Beis HaMikdash? God needed the light on. What did he need the light for? So our rabbis went to long and painstaking effort to point out to us that God, so to speak, in the Beis HaMikdash needed nothing from the outside. It was the outside that needed everything from it. He built a porch around the wall that surrounded the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. So the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash was terraced. On the bottom it was 10 wide. Then when you went up it indented. It was only 9 wide. And on top it was 8 wide. And from the indentations is where the porch was built. And the porch supported itself on the indentation in the brick. Eskiro Sabayis Soviv. All of the walls of the house all around. Around the the courtyard and around the building of the Beis Hamikdash, this series of balconies went all around. Now the Yotzia was used in the first Beis Hamikdash. People walked on it. It was a means of ingress and egress. It was a means for the Kohanim to get around. And it also undoubtedly had architectural and engineering value. Hayas slo'os soviv. He made, slo'os are like ribs. So the ribs were jutting protrusions of wood from the brick. On those jutting protrusions of the wood, he was able to put the foundations for this balcony. So it was supported in the wood. And that was the tzela. Others say that the tzlos were like separate little cells that existed in this porch-like structure that went around the Beis Hamikdash. So apparently one of the porches, like we do, you screen it in and you use it for a room. So they used it for the Kohanim. Each Kohen was entitled to a separate room, to a separate little cubicle. So the rooms were not sumptuous and they were not large. They were small like this. And they were like fenced in off the porch. Hayotzia hatachtona, the bottom balcony, was chomesh ba'ama, 5 amas. Rochba, 5 amas wide. V'hatichona, the middle one, was sheish ba'ama rochba. V'hashlishit sheva ba'ama rochba. The top one was 7. So again, because it was indented. So the bottom one had the most walls. The walls were the thickest. Therefore, its width was the least. The second one had less walls because it had been indented one already. So therefore, it was more of the balcony and less of the stone. The third one had even less stone because the indentation continued. So you have to imagine a terrace. You have to imagine steps going up, and the bottom step and matched on the other side by the bottom step, so there was the least amount of room between them. And then the second step, as it indented, so then there was more room. And the third step, again, as it indented, there was the most room. Ki migraos nosan labayis soviv chutza, there were these indentations in the wall of the Beis Hamikdash on the outside, levilti achos bekiros aboyis, so that none of the porches had to be built on the wall itself. It was not supported on the wall, it was supported on the indentation. The wall itself at the top was narrow, and he didn't put anything on the wall itself. But as he went down, he tapered the wall so that it became wider. It jutted out, and on what jutted out is where they established these porches. Great puzzle. This Beis Hamikdash, when it was built, Even Shlema, it was built out of whole stones. There were no cracked stones. There were no half stones. What the Tanakh is telling us here is that the mathematical work was so perfect that they didn't have to trim. You build it prefab, but even the best prefab doesn't fit together sometimes. You have to make it fit together. You have to squeeze it, you have to trim it, you have to bend it, you have to do something. This house, when it was built, Even Shlema, every stone was complete. There wasn't a stone touched to make it fit by itself. Masa, and don't forget these stones were transported. So in the transportation, cracking can occur, chipping, dropping it on end. Nevertheless, the stones fit. And that's how the Beis Hamikdash Nivno was built. Umakovos v'hagarzen, the chisel and the hatchet, kol kli barzel, any metal utensil, lo nishma baboyis behibonoso, was not heard in the Beis Hamikdash while it was being built. So again, the Gemara teaches us that based upon the pasuk in Chumash, that you shall not lift the sword upon my altar, right? That you couldn't cut the stones of the altar with chisels or metal tools, because metal tools are always the instruments of death. They always were used in a fashion to wield death. Even hatchets and hammers and saws, all the metal tools are dangerous instruments, terribly dangerous instruments. So in the Beis HaMikdash, Kol Kli Barzel Nishma Babayis Binoso. So they chose to follow it literally. They could have had a heter probably to do it differently, but they chose to do it literally, that they did not want any metal tools used, and there were no metal tools used, which is an amazing, amazing feat. If you're talking about a building of this size, built out of stone and out of wood, how do you build it without metal? So again, that was the miracle of the Shamir. But even after the miracle of the Shamir, there were other miracles that had to happen in order for it to fit exactly. Anyone who has ever bought a gym set and tried to assemble it knows that we're talking here about a miraculous event. No, the second temple was not that way. The second temple, it's not said clearly, but apparently it's not said that they didn't. So apparently they may have. Some say that they used them off the job site, not on the mountain itself, but that off the job site they had the workshops that did it. The entrance to the main wing, Sela is the main wing of the Beis HaMikdash, Al-Kesef Habayis Hayamonis, which bordered on the right-hand shoulder of the Beis HaMikdash, of the building. And then they mixed together, going ala tichona from the. So what he's saying here is like this. They had spiral staircases. That's the blulim. They had spiral staircases that went from one level. There were 3 levels here that were built. So if you were on the bottom level, then you had to get to the top level. So there was a spiral staircase that you went up. That's why it's called bolu, because it's like stirring, like mixing. And through these spiral staircases, they went up to the 2nd floor, and from the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor, by means of these spiral staircases which existed in the Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo pursued building the Beis HaMikdash. The rabbis say that the greatness was that he didn't get bogged down. That's always what happens. You start with very high hopes, and then, you run out of gas in the middle, or you run out of money, or you run out of workers, but you run out of spirit. It becomes such a hassle, and it becomes so difficult that he loses his heart for it. He loses his appetite for it. Let it, what's the difference? Let them put it in any way that they can. And you see that many times. If you've ever built a building, you had the joy of watching the workers build your building, then you know what I'm talking about. That after a period of time, you become so disgusted that you say, all right, just leave it. You guys go home. That's enough. Just leave it. And then you try to save it any way you can. That was not the case here. Shlomo built the Beis HaMikdash, and he completed it, meaning he made it fit. That's what Vaychaleu means, that he made all the joints fit. They all were mitered in perfectly. There was nothing that was out of sync. There was nothing that was out of line. There was nothing jarring in looking at the building. The symmetry of the building was present. And the symmetry of the building was meant to suggest a tranquility which was necessary in order to appreciate the services in the Beis HaMikdash. So they wanted an understated building. I was in Los Angeles. I davened in what is undoubtedly the fanciest shtibel that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it is really, it has 5 enormous chandeliers hanging in there, and each chandelier is thousands. And they have a vault, a big bank vault is the Oren Kodesh. with a combination. They said the first time they put it in, nobody knew the combination. They couldn't open the Aron Kodesh. And they have an enormous tapestry for a parochas, and then they have stained glass, and in fact the whole thing. But it's so open, we're talking about a shtil, we're not talking about it, I mean, I'll leave it to your imagination what ethnic group planned this and supports it. But it's not understated. The Beis Hamikdash, however, that Shlomo built, he understated it. He wanted it to be understated. The Beis Hamikdash that Herod built was also not understated. He didn't want. So there are two ideas, and maybe it fits the personality of the times, or of the people, or of the leader who is doing it. But sometimes the attraction lies in the understatement. Sometimes you see classical buildings, just the understatement is what gives it its beauty, and sometimes it's the whole Farnham that, you go to Versailles, it's also not understated, right? But that, Versailles, even in Upper Muncie would have a place. So, Vayechaleu, he finished the building that it was perfect, it fit. Vayispon es Abayis gave him, and he spanned the building. Vayispon is our word to span it. Same word. He spanned the ceiling. Ushderos ba'arozim, and he spanned the ceiling, and the beams all were from cedar. Others say that it refers to the fact that the cedar wood that he put on the ceiling was carved, and it had figures in it, and it had beauty to it. It wasn't just wood. Around he built his balcony that was 10 feet high, and the house was held together with the cedar wood. In other words, that was the superstructure. Like today, we hold it together with steel, and we build with brick or whatever, but the steel is what holds it together. There it was, these enormous wooden beams that held it together. So God comes to see his house. God said to Shlomo, listen, a house is a house, a building is a building. But unfortunately, sometimes when you build a house, you build a building, you lose sight of what the house is for, what the building is for. The house has a life of its own. Construction has a life of its own. It takes on a dimension all its own. And the person involved many times literally loses sight of what the purpose is. What did he do here? Who did he make it for? What does he want out of it? So God came and reminded him. He said, Shlomo, habayis hazeh asher ato boneh. This house that you built has only one purpose. It will survive only on the basis of this condition. In telech b'chukosai, if you shall go in my path, if you will follow my laws, ves mishpotai ta'aseh, and my judgments you will do, you will observe. V'shomarto es kol mitzvosai, and you will observe all of my commandments, even those that you don't understand. God here touches Shlomo's raw nerve, because Shlomo said he understands everything, right? He's the smartest of all people. He'll figure it out. And whenever something happened that he couldn't figure out, so he rejected it. Right? If I don't understand it, then it's wrong. Which is always our viewpoint of the matter. Doesn't make sense. Right? Sometimes we're learning a particularly difficult piece in the Gemara now, and some of the 9th graders are having a problem, so they all say, Rebbe, the Gemara is wrong. Because they can't figure it out. So it must be the Gemara is wrong, right? So you have to explain to them that the Gemara probably is not wrong. But that you have to work on it. You have to be able to see it in a different light. You're not looking at it correctly. Something's missing in your analysis. And that's what God told him. If you'll observe all of my mitzvahs, to go in their path, to follow them, to pursue them, then you got a deal. I'll fulfill my promise that I made to your father David. The promise was that the dynasty of Israel will be through you, and that your children will forever be the kings of Israel, and that the Beis Hamikdash will remain, and the Jewish state will remain. It's a quid pro quo. This building has a purpose only if the greater purpose is served thereby. If the purpose is that it's only a building, then forget it. Only a building. All buildings are doomed. All buildings eventually will not survive. So if you do what I say, then v'shachanti b'sof b'nei Yisrael, which is a paraphrase of what is written here in the Parsha of Teruma, v'yosu li migdash v'shachanti b'sochash. They shall make for me a Beis Hamikdash, a holy place, v'shachanti b'socham, and I shall dwell in their midst. So v'shachanti b'sof b'nei Yisrael, I will dwell not in this house. God is not limited to a building. I'm not interested, God says, to being in the house. You'll come visit me, on Mother's Day. Because God is a woman, right? But v'shachanti b'sof b'nei Yisrael, I shall dwell in the midst of the Jewish people. In them, in their houses, in their hearts, in their souls, in their behavior, in their personalities. That's where you'll find me. Lo e'ezov es ami Yisrael, and I shall never forsake my people Israel. So there's a bittersweet quality to this statement because we know the story, right? We know that it didn't happen. We know that in Shlomo's lifetime itself it began to unravel. He married the daughter of Paro. All sorts of things started to happen. And it happened because of his great confidence in himself. Because he was the wisest of all men. In the words of the Gemara, he said, the rules don't apply to me. It applies to other kings. Other kings can't have a lot of wives because the wives will be a bad influence. But I'm above that. Other kings can't have a lot of money because it'll destroy them. But I know how to handle money. Other kings can't have a lot of horses and a great personal army, but I can handle it. And the end is that he couldn't handle it either. That also is a great human trait. Don't worry about me. I can handle it. Everybody else goes down the tubes, but I'm going to get away with it. So all of that bittersweet quality is implied here in the words that God says to him, in the blessing regarding the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash itself.
אתם לא יודעים כמה, מי שכאן רק מאזין, אז